Now I take the opportunity to say hello to everybody. Good morning to our friends in the US. Good afternoon to our friends in the UK, in Europe, in our one friend in the UAE, one person in Africa, our friends in Southeast Asia, good evening, and a couple of people in Australia, good late evening. Hope everybody is well. I think this evening we have a couple of questions and then we have a theme to discuss, suggested by JC and Joyce.
Phra Ajahn, dear Ajahn, kindly advise on how to do the proper counting method for breathing meditation. First, to calm the mind. Thank you.
Okay, so the way I practice with breath meditation is counting with breath meditation. Normally I would do Buddho myself, or I do the first of the 5 body contemplations, Kesa, Loma, Naka, Danta, Tacho, in forward and reverse. But if you want to use, sometimes I use Buddho, Dhammo, Sangho. One in breath Buddho, one out breath Buddho, next in breath Dhammo, next out breath Dhammo, next in breath Sangho, next out breath Sangho, etc. And again. But with counting, it's good to start actually at the beginning of the nose, 1, at the chest, 2, in the abdomen, 3 on the in-breath, and then on the out-breath again, 3, 2, 1. Do that for a couple of minutes, just establishing the practice of counting. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. After you've done that for a couple of minutes, on the in-breath, count 1, on the out-breath, count 1. Next breath, 2, in, out, 2. Next one, 3, out, 3, up to 5. And when you get to 5, then you repeat 5. 5 on the in-breath, 5 on the out-breath, 4, 4, 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1. And then you start again. It's counting is very skillful for people who think a lot, because when your mind wanders, you will forget which number you are up to. So you sometimes when you're trying to do breath meditation, if you're not counting, trying to do Buddho, or you're not using mental recitation, the mind can go off on a bit of a fantasy or a proliferation, and many minutes go by before you realize. But if you're counting 1 to 5 and 5 back to 1, when you don't know what number you're up to, your mind has wandered and you start again. So it can be a very good thing to do, particularly at the beginning of the meditation. If your mind is very busy, count the breath for the first 5 or 10 minutes, and then switch to something more simple. So I have done that during periods of time when there's a lot of thought. Some people also practice increasing, counting up to, once you get to 5, and then you come back down to 1, and you start again, you go up to 6, and come back to 1, and then you start again, go up to 7, come back to 1. If you want to train with really paying attention and keeping your mind with the breath. So for beginning breath meditation practitioners, it's a good thing to do, because it really does train us to be with that task and really train the mind to be aware of the breath and to be in the body and aware of the breathing. So yeah, it can be very helpful. But as for myself, I will use Buddho, Dhammo, Sangho, Kesa, Loma, Naka, Danta, Tacho, and then backwards, or just Buddho, mostly Buddho. So it's simple methods.
Thank you, Ajahn. Ajahn, the next question, Ajahn Achalo, in your new book, The Process of Realization, you mentioned Ajahn Anan can come out of a particular meditation state, and he can then decide to spread loving kindness into the world element. Can you elaborate on this? What's the difference between this type of loving kindness and those that we ordinary lay people send out with sincerity? Thank you.
Yeah. So, I believe that Ajahn Anan is experiencing the fruit of Buddhist practice, the ultimate fruit, which is liberation of mind, purification of mind, means that Ajahn has access to Nibbana, is established in Nibbana. So we're talking about Lokiya types of states of samadhi, worldly samadhi. That's the jhanas of people who are not yet on an enlightened level. Very wholesome, very pure, but pure samadhi, but not yet purified of all greed, hatred, and delusion. Then you have Lokuttara jhana, the jhana of Aryan beings, which is more powerful because the mind of the person experiencing that jhana is significantly purified or completely purified. But for a person who is actually an arahant, they have realized nibbana, and they can take nibbana as the object. So I'm not even really sure if it's a meditation object. It's liberation of mind as the object. So when the mind is resting in the liberated state, it, from what I understand, what my teachers have explained, what I've read, studied, it's not aware of the conditions. So nibbana is asankata, the unconditioned. Samsara is the world of conditions. So an arahant can place their mind in the liberated state and not be aware of the conditions at all. And there's no self-view in that experience, just an experience of a liberated, purified mind. So when we look at the story of Lord Buddha after his enlightenment, there were 7 weeks he spent under the Bodhi tree, and there were some wonderful teachings he gave during that period. And it usually is explained such as, after 1 week of delighting in the bliss of liberation, Lord Buddha then considered the 5 spiritual powers, dependent origination in forward and reverse, 1 week, 5 spiritual powers another week, 4 foundations of mindfulness another week. But he allowed his mind to be in the bliss of liberation for a week, came out of that absorption or that state, and considered what it was that led to that state. There's another sutta where Sariputta is delighting in his contemplation of voidness, and it's a short sutta, but it's one of my favorites. The Buddha is aware of Sariputta, who the Brahmadevas go and exclaim to Lord Buddha. I think it's 10,000 Brahmadevas come and rejoice in the radiance of Sariputta's mind. And Sariputta goes and talks to the Buddha, if I recall correctly. And the Devas were exclaiming, the radiance of Sariputta's mind is amazing, it is wondrous, wonderful and marvelous, and we do not know from whence it shines forth. So the Brahmadevas have the jhanas, the Arupa jhanas. They're very, very radiant minds. And they can see that the radiance of Sariputta's mind is superior. And they come and offer their respects. And they cannot see it. And that's because if they're not yet enlightened, they're experiencing very, very refined conditions and the purity of samadhi. But they have not yet realized nibbana, which is superior, say the wise. So, and then Sariputta explains that abiding in a state which is described as voidness. Voidness means what? Absence of the conditions. But there is the bliss of liberation, the mind that has realized that emptiness. So yes, I believe that Ajahn Anan, others, Lumpur Liam, Lumpur Piek, Ajahn Dan, Ajahn Char, obviously, Ajahn Mahabua, when they were still with us, they can, in any moment they want to, become not aware of the conditions, abide in the unconditioned, and then coming out of that state, the mind is very powerful. And then they can blast the conditioned world with the loving kindness of an enlightened being, which is more powerful than the loving kindness of a being who has metta jhana, but is not yet fully purified. So, yes, it's a good thing to contemplate, because people are so. It's like fish swimming in water. We're so in the conditions and contemplating the goal of emptiness and the unconditioned. Sometimes it's very helpful to understand that the world is not solid. Self and other is not the ultimate truth. Realizing the emptiness, impermanent, unsatisfactory, not self nature of conditions will lead to bliss of liberation in moments, and then for periods, and then to a point where it will never degenerate. And to pay respects to such a one is an enormous merit.
Thank you, Phra Ajahn. Phra Ajahn, the next question. Dear Phra Ajahn, in conjunction with Anandagiri's 10th anniversary, can Phra Ajahn share some teachings about balancing among personal practice, building a monastery, guiding a monastic order, sharing your teachings online, leading retreats and pilgrimages, and also working with client villages and supporters around? We believe Phra Ajahn has a lot of interesting stories from building a beautiful monastery in the past 10 years, and many beautiful examples of giving services, generosity, and endurance during tough period. Thank you.
So that's a very big question, isn't it? So I guess I'm just going to start. This will be Ajahn Achalo in chatty mode. Hope you're all in the mood for listening. So, yes. The foundation of the bhikkhu life is that we have to keep a whole bunch of rules. So we have our 227 training rules. And then in the meditation tradition, of which I am a part, we aim to do some meditation practice every day. For myself, every morning, every afternoon, every evening, every day. Even so, there are many hours in any given day. And one of the things that I love about the Thai forest tradition is the periods of more structured schedule, but also periods of more open schedule. And also Thai culture in general is quite pragmatic. So a lot of the villages, for example, will build their own houses. They don't have the same building standards and requirements as Western countries because they're not wealthy, but many Thai people know how to mix concrete, pour a slab, make some bricks, put on some stucco, and they get together with their friends or hire a builder. And so there's a pragmatism, and it's not required. It's obviously changing as Thailand becomes a more developed country, but it's not required that everybody has a degree and that everybody has to be a professional to try your hand at something. And so people are generous towards the monastics, but they don't necessarily have a lot of spare time. So in the forest tradition, it's not uncommon for the monks to be helping with the building projects for periods of time. It saves on labor costs. It's a way to express harmony among the monastic community. There will be days when the villagers come and help. And so I think it's really nice that you can develop a broad range of skills and knowledge that I think would be quite difficult as a layperson in Australia, for example, because there's a large middle class and a lot of professionals, and you need permission to do things, and there's a right way and a wrong way for doing all sorts of things. So when I first came to Anandagiri, well, I'll just say a little bit about, as a junior monk, I was involved in helping to build a couple of kutis at Abhayagiri during my 4th and 5th pantas when I was training with Ajahn Achalo. So there would be a morning chanting, morning sit, some breakfast, and then the woke monk would delegate some tasks. And at that time they were renovating a few kutis, and they were also building some kutis. So that was probably the beginning of my getting some experience with drills and hammers and wood. And similarly, when I went to live with Ajahn Kalyano for a period of time, the monks there did most of the building of the kutis. And one monk in particular, Ajahn Yanadipo, he had been there for some years, and he knew basically from the posts and the stumps up how to build an entire kuti. And so again there, I helped to build one kuti. That would be like the morning work between breakfast and lunch. And so yeah, you get some basic knowledge of building products and building methods. And it hasn't been a huge part of my life, but it has been a part of my life. And I guess with my own father used to build renovations on houses that we lived in, and then they'd sell the house for more money than they bought it for, get another house. My dad would make renovations on the weekends. And eventually he built his house, the last house, he built the entire thing. So I was always kind of aware that if you try your hand at something, if you use your brain, pay attention, ask questions when you need to, that we can do these kinds of things. So when I first came to Anandagiri, it was some barren hills, a potted dirt road, no water, no electricity, and 3-meter tall grass. And I had at that time I was 38, and I had a feeling when I stood on the land, I just really, really liked it. And I actually had this voice, kind of like a deep, resonant feeling resounded in my body and mind of, I could die here. When I stood on the land where I'm currently involved in making an abbot's kuti, when I stood on the highest part of the land, I just had this feeling I could die here. Now, I'd never had that thought or that feeling anywhere else, so I didn't notice that. And one of my motivations, one of my reasons I was willing to even consider building a monastery was that, funny enough, I didn't know of many where I could meditate as much as I wanted to. And so the idea of building your own monastery is that you will be able to meditate more than is possible because I came into the training really with a very sincere interest in meditation. Before I turned up at Wat Nanachat, I think I'd done 10-day retreats in the previous 2 years. So I was very interested in meditation and continue to be. And so I was interested to live in a place where there would be more flexibility with the schedule. And opportunities for retreats, like to do retreats at your kuti, for example. So the idea of making a small monastery where the schedule will be more flexible, and I'd have more opportunity to get more meditation into my day and have opportunities for retreat. So that's what made me receptive to the idea. And then why I accepted the piece of land when the man, Kun Son, invited me to come and look at it was because the weather here is about 4 degrees cooler than the rest of Thailand, and a little bit drier because it's basically smack in the middle of Thailand. So it's further away from the ocean. It's less humid. And it was also very quiet, and to this day continues to be a quiet area. So in Thailand, it's a fairly small country now with 70 million people. So a lot of the forest monasteries are very close to villages, and they don't have very good zoning laws. So it's not uncommon to get karaoke phenomenon coming from resorts on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So, and we still don't have much of that. In those days, very little. We do have a couple of days a year where we get music coming in, but it's not very often. So it's a quiet place. And then also the villages themselves, where the villagers had been wanting a monastery for about 15 years. So it's quite a poor looking village. And one of my main reluctance initially was whether or not they would be happy to support some monks. And so when I went on alms round, I think I got 4 full bowls of food, and I asked everybody, do you want monks? And they all said, please, please, please. We've wanted monks for a long time. So when I saw the amount of support that the village would give, then I knew it was going to be hard. I knew it was going to be hard work. Basically, you have to make a monastery from bald hills. No electricity, no water, potted road, not even trees. And you have to make a forest monastery. So it was and is a lot of work. But the structure of doing some meditation in the morning before alms round, and then doing more meditation after a light breakfast of some fruit. And then you've got this daytime period where you can do all sorts of things. And I will take periods of retreat during the rainy season, maybe 6 weeks. And then I've been going to India for 6 weeks, twice a year for the last 5 years. So I squeeze in a lot of intensive meditation periods. And but outside of those meditation periods, I would try to do 4 or 5 sessions of meditation a day, but I still have many hours available. And so I have, as many of you know, made guided meditations. I've been involved in co-creating a website, sharing things on Insight Timer, YouTube channel, writing books recently. But yes, Anandagiri, we did receive support to get our drill a well and get our water in the first couple of months, and we received more support to get more land. And then the Share a Building Supplies company was a friend. The owners of that company were a friend of the man who offered the land. So we got some help with offering of building materials and the offering of an architect and an engineer's advice. So within that first year, we did get together a water system, an electrical system, 4 kutis, and eating hall, meditation hall. So by the end of the first year, we had all of that in place. And it was a lot of work. And we also planted, I think, 5,000 trees. But 38, it was a good age to do it. Now I'm 48. If I had to do it again at this age, I wouldn't. It's like, I knew it would be hard, and it was approximately maybe 5 times harder than I thought. So if you've never done something before, you don't know how hard it's going to be. So you can know that something's going to be hard, but you don't know how hard. Now I know how hard it was. And I don't have any regrets, but I wouldn't do it at my age. So I think it's kind of worked out. Every second year after that, we would do another tree planting But the nice thing about working with Thai people is that the forestry department want to give you some trees. The soldiers are willing to come and dig holes so that when the villagers come to help plant the trees, the holes are already dug. So if you have some people skills, you know how to liaise a bit. It's a bit like making a tapestry, and there are all these threads and all these colors that are available, but you need to kind of string it all together and just keep going until you know, the holes get dug, the posts for the stakes get delivered, the trees get picked up, the teachers, the local government officials, the soldiers help, the villagers all come and help plant the trees. So, you know, first couple of years, I remember I was walking around with my phone held to my ear a lot. And after about 3 years, I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be a monk walking around with a mobile phone attached to my ear the whole time. I don't like this. I want to be someone who's in my body in the present moment. But it was necessary. It was just a great deal of work and a lot of liaising. And but the fact is, the people were there who wanted to. So the forestry department wanted to give trees. The soldiers were willing to come and help plant them. The villagers, if they knew the day, they would take the day off and they would come and plant them. And things, it was a very workable situation, so long as you're willing to facilitate, liaise, and be there through it all. And it's very interesting because it was very stressful, those first few years, because all sorts of challenges come up. And you can only guess what things are going to cost, and it always costs more, and you don't know that in the beginning. So as a monk, you've got this pressure on you. You're not supposed to ask for things. And then, so suppose you think that the labor for the kuti is going to be 200,000 baht. It turns out that it's 250,000 baht. You've already talked to the sponsor. They were happy to offer 200,000 baht. Now you're short 50,000 baht. You're a monk. You can't ask for money. What do? It's quite a stressful situation, actually, because you want the kuti to be finished so that the sponsor is happy with their offering, but you don't want to ask the sponsor for more money. So what do? And this is where my good friends Malin and Medao and later on Joyce, when a project is mostly covered but there's something lacking, when you can mention to somebody, when people have to give pawarana, it's called. You have to say to a monk, Ajahn, if there's anything that you need, I give you permission to ask me. And then, so if you have a lay person who you can delegate to, committee member, then they mention to their friends and you can get that final amount that you need to finish that kuti without offending or asking for too much from the original sponsor. But there's all sorts of skills that you have to learn and all sorts of stress that you have to learn how to manage. And I remember the tree planting thing in particular was quite stressful, because I was attached to the idea of creating a forest, and you've bothered all of these people. You've bothered the forestry department, you've bothered the villagers, you've bothered the soldiers, you've bothered the people who pay for the grass cutting. And so you get some attachment. This forest has to become a forest. And basically for the first 3 years, like, the trees just didn't grow. And the grass kept growing to, like, it would grow to 2 or 3 meters if you didn't cut it. And so it was very frustrating, this sense of trying to find sponsorship. Thai people don't like to offer money to cut grass. They were very happy to offer as many Buddha statues as you want, chedis, a Dharma hall. But when it comes to cutting the grass so that the forest monks get a forest, no, for some reason they don't think paying for grass cutting is merit. And so, yes, the Malaysians helped, I think, once for some grass cutting. One group of people helped once for some grass cutting, but I needed to get the grass cut 5 times a year, every year. It's quite stressful. And but then I would get invited to teach a retreat in Malaysia. I would teach a retreat in Malaysia, and Malaysians would make some donations. Money would be transferred to the bank, and somehow we just scraped through. The first 3 years were hard. And we scraped through, and the grass got cut, and the buildings got completed. And when Ajahn Tomato came for our, in the 3rd year for our second katina. That's when a lot of people who'd been supporting us actually came to the monastery, people in Bangkok and from Ubon. And they saw that we didn't have a road yet. And so then a donation came from many people to help actually make a paved and sealed road after 3 years. And so a lot of people don't, you've come to Anandagiri now, it's quite beautiful, it's well established, and there is a forest. It's quite amazing actually. And but the first 2 months I lived in a grass thatch hut. For the first 3 years I was sunburnt all the time. There was no trees. You had to come out and look at the work projects. We didn't have a fridge. So the idea of having a cool drink, we didn't have a fridge. And for the first year, after the first year, somebody offered us a fridge. And then people realized, oh, I can offer nampana. People started offering sweet drinks. Now we always have sweet drinks, and we always have cool sweet drinks in a fridge now. But we didn't have that for the first year. In the second year, I lived in for the first 6 months, I lived in a grass thatch dwelling. And the mud in this part of Thailand, when you get your road graded and it's dirt, and after the rain, the mud would stick to your flip-flops, like 2 inches of mud sticking to your flip-flops. And you'd go to your grass kuti and there's no water. So you've got mud sticking, you know, when there's that much mud around, it sticks to your feet as well. And you're in your kuti and you've got mud on your feet. And if you want to walk to the place where you can have a bath, you have to walk through more mud and you have to walk back through more mud. So it's, you do have to practice a lot of patience, and you need to have a sense of humor, and you need to be able to be okay with a bit of dirt, you know. And I remember when I was staying in the thatch kuti, putting on my undershirt. It's kind of like it's like a t-shirt, but it only has one shoulder. You have an arm sticking through. So I'm putting on my stretchy t-shirt thing, getting ready for my last evening meditation. And I start itching, and then I itch, and then I itch, and then I itch. And then I have a look under my shirt, and there's like a hairy worm was inside the stretchy t-shirt. And so you get covered in this, you're having an allergic reaction to a hairy worm. That happened twice in the first 6 months. So not having windows, not having doors, living in a grass thatched kuti in the forest comes with interesting challenges. So, and that when you get one of those hairy worms, it's swollen and itching for 3 days. So it's like, okay, that becomes your practice for 3 days, dealing with the itchiness of the hairy worm. And there were some times when where I was quite heartbroken. And there were other times where I was just in awe of the kindness and generosity. I guess it's like when you take on a big project, you're increasing the likelihood of having 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. So I would say I did have 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. Yeah. Yeah, we had to get this, grass cutters would come to cut the grass. And I remember in the 3rd year, some new grass cutters came and they cut this chunk of area, and they also cut down the trees, about 50 or 100 trees. And I was just like, oh my God, I have to pay these people so much money to cut the grass, and the trees aren't growing, and they come and they cut down the trees. It was really hard. And I look back now, and it's like, after the trees for the first 3 years, they have to send down their roots. It all makes perfect sense now. They have to send down their roots before their bottom of their trunk thickens up. Then when they know when the tree can support more foliage, it'll send up its trunk and send out more leaves. But until then, it's going to send down its roots. So the trees were getting ready to take off, but they were just going to do it in their time. And so after about 5 years, okay, our trees were 2 meters. Now we're at 10 years, the trees grow 1 meter a year now, and can't stop them. We definitely have a forest which is established and growing fast. It's very beautiful. But it's very interesting reflection on sowing effort, being patient, and results come. So, like I said, we didn't have a fridge for the first year, and after the second year we did, and then we've never been without sweet cold drinks since. I started in a grass thatch with hairy grubs and mud. Now we have paved road, stones on the road, water at every dwelling. So it's all very civilized. So the sharer company, when they offered the materials the first time, 2 semi-trailers of concrete fiber cement, like hardy board, arrived in the village. The villagers had never seen anything like it. It's like this. Then we had to get it all up the road in the wet season in pickup trucks. So some very, very generous people helped us a lot. Our big Dharma hall, I remember Yom Noi, the co-owner of the sharer company, about extending our current Dharma hall, the old one. And she said, well, it's not very strong structurally, so you're going to have to redo it one day. So she suggested that we make a bigger one and make it stronger. And I told her, well, Yom Noi, I really like meditation and I don't like building projects very much. So I'll agree to this on one condition. We were close by that stage and she gave me permission to speak frankly. I said, I'm willing to take this on if it can be finished within 6 months. I'm only giving myself to this for 6 months because I don't want the monastery to be a building project for a year. And she said, okay. So she helped to coordinate different teams of workers so that several teams were working on it. So it's a 22 by 22 meter building and quite a high ceiling, 3-layered tiered roof. And we really did finish it in a 6-month period. Remember, another funny story was Yom Dukata asked me, Ajahn, is there anything missing from your Dharma hall project that you feel something missing? And I said, yeah, I feel like we need a Bodhi tree out the front because I don't want the front of the Dharma hall to look like a car park. I would like it to look like a sacred space. So I think a Bodhi tree in the middle of it would be nice. And in Thailand, you can buy trees. They kind of dig them up. There's places where you can go and get a tree and they replant a tree. And she said to me, how big would you like it, Ajahn? And I said, well, as big as possible. But to me, as big as possible meant like this, because I was thinking, the only cranes that had been able to get up our hill into our monastery at that stage were cranes that could lift between 3 and 4 tons. So for me, big as possible means like that. And I told her that. I said, the cranes we can take about between 3 and 5 tons. So she finds this fabulous Bodhi tree, which is, I'm not joking, I can't even show you how fat the trunk is. It's like you need 2 people to hug it to embrace the circumference of the trunk. So she goes and buys this 62-year-old Bodhi tree, and she assures me it's only 5 tons. And then I thought, okay, well, we're going to need 2 of these cranes that can lift 5 tons to lift it up in tandem. So anyway, the Bodhi tree gets delivered to Pitsanalok where she lives, and she gets a bigger crane to lift the Bodhi tree off that truck onto another truck. And the crane has a scale. And the crane tells her that the Bodhi tree was 16 tons. So she called me up, she said, and she's crying. The Bodhi tree is 16 tons, I don't know what to do. I'm like, I don't know what to do either. And so then she went on this search. She said, I'm going to try to find a way. And she found a crane, which was neither a small crane or a big crane, a kind of an intermediate crane. And that crane had a kind of although the crane was like this long, for example, the wheelbase was kind of in the middle. That was important because that meant the crane could turn tight corners. So this crane driver came out to look at our land, and he said, yeah, he thinks it's tight, but he would actually be able to get the Bodhi tree up. He would be able to lift the Bodhi tree So yeah, we were able to, and we were chanting the victory chant, the Mahakaruniko, and the Jayanto as the crane was coming up the mountain. May the crane please make it up the mountain. May the crane please make it up the mountain. And the crane did make it up the mountain. And as it turns out, the Bodhi tree was 62 tons, and we planted it on the 26th. And in Thailand, there's this way to buy lottery numbers where if the last 2 digits are correct, I think you get 10 times what you paid. If the last 3 digits are correct, you get 100 times, something like that. So we never encourage this, of course, but the Thai people will be Thai people, and they like to buy lottery tickets. So apparently the people from 2 villages away bought number 26 for the day that we planted it. But the people in this village bought number 62 for the age of the Bodhi tree. And when the lottery number came out at 26, the people of the village were upset with me for not telling them that it was going to come out as 26 and not 62. But I had no idea. But sometimes that happens, where you think the devas are rejoicing. And another interesting story was, I remember thinking, most people know Ajahn Achalo has a certain amount of faith in Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, as well as the Buddha, Maitreya Buddha in the future, the Arahants. I also like Kuan Yin Avalokiteshvara. And I remember thinking at some stage, the reason I didn't let myself have a big Kuan Yin statue was because, no, I want the strict forest monks to come, and I want the Arahants to come, and I don't want them to be critical of me. You know, you're beginning of being an abbot, you're worried about what people think of you and how critical they'll be of you. And so 2.5 years have gone by, and none of the Arahants have come. And I'm like, I want, since the Arahants aren't coming anyway, I think I'm going to let myself have another Avalokiteshvara statue, because by that stage I knew that the monastery had a lot of ghosts in the area, and I knew that I needed help to help them. And I thought, I need someone to pray to for help, because I knew that this area had been a war zone, but I didn't know that there were tens of thousands of ghosts. And I think if I knew there were tens of thousands of ghosts, I probably wouldn't have accepted the invitation to come and live with. I remember once I went up to visit Lumpur Pat, and I asked him, does my monastery have more devas or more ghosts? And he looked at me and he says, I know the answer, but I don't want to tell you. I'm like, that means there's more ghosts. So anyway, I wanted some support and some help with the ghosts. And so, yeah, we got this. And I remember I wanted a 1.70 meter tall male Avalokiteshvara statue. And so Joyce and Miss Lee and Chai Ek started searching around Malaysia, because they were very happy to be interested to help offer one. And they found this place which had some very nice grey granite statues. And the abbot of that monastery in the Kuala Lumpur area had been to shows in China to see the best sculptures, and he had like quite a collection of fabulous sculptures. So he knew a good place, reasonable price, with a color that was serene. And so we decided to order one. So 1.70 meters was my idea. But when Joyce and Miss Lee and Chai Ek discussed with the sculptor said, no, 1.70 meters is too small. It won't look right. I've been making these statues for years. The right size is 2.20 meters, he said. So I said, okay, if he says so, we have to trust him. He's the expert. And then I remember looking at the picture it's like this Avalokiteshvara with one leg raised. It looks like he's sitting on a rock or on a mountain, but it was made out of a square block of rock. And it just didn't look like a mountain. There was something wrong with this. It doesn't look like a mountain. It's too square. So I said, well, could you ask them to make 2 pieces to join at the side, so it's kind of rounded, so that Bodhisattva is resting on a mountain? And so they did anyway. So when the statue came, and we made the stand for it, it was much bigger than my kind of fear. Oh no, people are going to be critical of me for having a Kuan Yin. All of a sudden there's this huge, huge Guan Yin, which I really like. But I'm like, oh, it really stands out. Anyway, as soon as the statue's in place, Ajahn Sumedho contacts me and he says, Ajahn Achalo, I'd like to come and visit you. I'd like to come and encourage you. And I realized we don't have anywhere. So he agreed to come for our katina. And we didn't have anywhere to receive 300 or 400 people, 30 or 50 monks. The only area where I could make an open area to receive that many people was right next to the Avalokiteshvara statue. And I'm like, this isn't going to work. We need the Buddha. We need a Buddha. And so I chatted with a few friends, and yeah, they were quite happy to make a Buddha statue for an outdoor meditation area, and went up to Chiang Rai. And so then I needed to get this, and the Buddha needed to be bigger than the Avalokiteshvara, because you need to give a proper amount of respect, and then he needed to be higher. And so all of a sudden I had to build this platform, and I had to get this big Buddha, and he had to be higher. And so what started off as this idea of one small Guan Yin as a little bit of encouragement became the beginning of quite a grand development. So anyway, behind that Avalokiteshvara statue now is a 23-meter tall chedi, which we commenced in our 7th year, and the platform now has 3 layers, and we can easily take 50 monks and 500 lay people on our katina days, and it's all very beautiful. But it was just interesting how intending to start small, things kind of got bigger, and that's been the theme. That's been a theme many times. I think if people come to Anandagiri now, they would assume that I came with a grand vision and I was going to do something grand, and it's not at all the case. The land was offered as 15 rai, which is about 7 acres. And then another piece of land became available next door, and another piece of land became available next door, and the price was very reasonable, and lay students were willing to offer it. And so 15 rai became 170 rai in a 3-year period. So that's about 70 acres, but I never imagined having a 70-acre reforestation project. And like I said, I was asking Yom Noi, can I extend my current Dhamma hall, which was about 10 meters long by 6 meters wide? And she's, no, we should make the proper one now. At that time, her mother's dementia was getting worse, and Noi wanted to make a lot of merit to help her mum and hopefully slow down the dementia. So she wanted to offer this beautiful white marble Buddha statue from Carrara, white Venus marble from Carrara in Italy. Just the Buddha statue itself was like 1.2 million baht. And I remember saying, no, it's too big, it's too beautiful, it's too expensive. And Noi then asked Wat Nanachat, would you like it? Wat Nanachat wasn't ready. They hadn't built their boat yet. And she asked me again, why don't you consider this for the Dhamma hall? And so again, we got something bigger, more beautiful, and then I thought we would. And the Dhamma hall, with the help of her company and many other students, is 18 by 18 meters with a 2-meter balcony all the way around. And so that's been a kind of a recurring theme. And even then the idea of the chedi, I was going to do a 4 by 4 meter wide by 12 meters, and which became 6 by 6 by 18. And as we started to build it, the sculptor in Chiang Rai was saying, the rock comes in a certain size, 2 by 2 by 4 meters. You just chop it 1, 2, 3, 4, and you get these perfect pieces of rock for 2 meter, 2 by 4 2-meter Buddha statues. And so the original plan was the Buddha would be 2 meters, 1 meter 50, 1 meter 30, 1 meter. And the sculptor was like, no, just use all of the stone that we have. I'll charge you the same price. And so the chedi went from being 18 meters to 23 meters. And so it's just been a recurring theme that somehow things became bigger, more grand, more beautiful than I ever intended. And yeah, there's a picture of our beautiful chedi. That was probably a Katina evening, I think. It's a very lovely space. And, the good news is the main inspiration for the Chedi was to try to help the ghosts. I remember I was meditating one night, and I think that something helped to influence my meditation so that I would see this, because normally I would not see something so grand. What I saw was 50,000 ghosts standing in front of the monastery, wearing white, with their hands in a respectful gesture, but their heads were at the surface of the ground. And that's how I knew they weren't human. They were what you would call subhuman. But they were wearing white and they had no radiance. So that meant little merit. If it was a deva, you would see them floating above the ground or in the sky and they would have a lot of radiance. But to see about 50,000 ghosts respectfully standing in front of the monastery now, I was irritated by this experience. This wasn't something I was happy about. I was thinking, even though they had a respectful demeanor, I don't think anybody would consider it auspicious to be seeing 50,000 ghosts. So I'm like, what are they doing in front of this monastery? I don't like it. I don't want them there. I want them to go away. So I did have that initial reaction. But then I started to think about it. They're probably standing in front of the monastery because this, if you're a ghost, you don't have a lot of merit. It's not like you can travel around. Basically, this was the monastery in the area where they could come and ask for some help. And so my heart started to soften. I'm like, well, they're probably standing in front of this monastery because that's the one they have. And then I thought, well, maybe I should help them. I should try to help them. And so the idea of building a Chedi came to mind, because building a Chedi is, in terms of things that you can build, it creates the most merit. So obviously, large numbers of beings that need merit, you need a lot of merit. And a Chedi, you can involve a lot of people. Another nice thing about the Chedi is you can have small sponsors and large sponsors. So everybody could afford to offer a few bricks. And the villagers are quite happy to come up and help unload the bricks, offer their time, offer their energy. And then the big sponsors could offer the statues in the Chedi, or people could join together and offer it. So it was a grand project with the intention of helping to dedicate merits, and also with the intention of attracting more devas, because having a lot of ghosts around isn't very good for the energy in a monastery, because they have a certain sadness. They're experiencing the ripening of difficult karma they have to experience for some time before they can move on. So a lot of that, there were days where everyone in the monastery felt a bit kind of tired and got a headache in the first few years. And so the other wonderful thing about the Chedi project is that it was a good reason to invite great monks to come. And so when we started building the Chedi, Ajahn Anan and Lompo Biek came each year for 3 years, and actually twice in the last year. So they were able to help transfer the merit that the lay people came and we dedicated together. And apparently at least 10,000 of those ghosts have been reborn as devas. A lot more ghosts are still in that state in between births, but their situation has improved. So they have some radiance, they have less suffering, and they're still accumulating merit in order to be able to move on. And more devas did come and live in the monastery. So it was one of those things. I never intended when I came here that I would build a large Chedi one day. The Chedi came with a lot of work, 3 years of a lot of work, but I have no regrets about that. I think when I'm dying, leaving this life, and I think of the things that I did, I will be happy to have built the Chedi. But I was very lucky, we're talking about balancing projects with work. I was very lucky that my merit ripened in the way to have the opportunity to go to Bodh Gaya as I did, because there were definitely days where I would look to the monks sit in a row, and there were definitely days where I would look down the line and I would wonder, how is it that all the other monks got the life that I wanted? They get to live in a simple monastery with a nice friendly abbot where they have a lot of time to meditate. But here I am with the emails and the phone calls and the meetings with the workers and the looking at the accounting and coming out and checking the building project 3 times a day. And but so my life became busier for periods than I had hoped. But I learned to balance it by taking periods of retreat. So the monks were very kind in that they would allow me to have 1 month or 6 weeks of retreat in my kuti during the rainy season. And they were happy to take care of the monastery for me when I went to India for 6 weeks. And so I started going to India for 6 weeks. And as you know, I worked up to meditate up to 3,000 hours under the Bodhi tree there. So as a meditation monk in the meditation tradition, I feel that it's okay to have a period of time where there's more busyness, more engagement, making some kind of auspicious project, but it has to be balanced then with a period of intensive practice. And but even at my busiest, I would still meditate at least 3 times a day. And on periods of retreat, I will meditate 6, 7, 8 times a day. Or in Bodh Gaya, I was meditating only 4 times a day, but 2.5 hours per session. And it's interesting when I look at my practice, some of the best practice I've ever had occurred after periods of being quite busy with an auspicious project. And I think there's a few reasons for this. I think to be busy with projects all the time is not good. But to have a good foundational commitment to some practice every morning, every afternoon, every evening as a monk, that's the foundation, good level of virtue. And then a project that makes a lot of good karma. After that, there's a feeling of being happy to have done that. So it's conducive to feelings of contentment and well-being. You did something worth doing that you feel proud of. So that's good for well-being. But the other factor is you're aware that your practice has degenerated a little bit. So you really need to pick up your practice. So there's a renewed enthusiasm to revitalize and resuscitate your practice. So a combination of those things, a fairly good foundation before the busyness related to doing something worth doing, feeling happy to have done it, but being a bit worried about your practice, then really putting good effort to kind of pick it up again. Then that's 2 periods, 1 after Abhayagiri, 1.5 years after Abhayagiri. So very good meditation and good insights during the winter retreat. And similarly, during the periods after building the teddy, 1 or 2 levels, then going to Bodh Gaya. So very good practice. So yeah, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that even though I'm a meditation monk, I've learned about reforestation. I've learned about building. I've learned a lot about the lives of farmers, forestry workers, builders, and then opportunity to teach. Sometimes they say you teach best what you most need to learn. In the process of teaching a retreat, for example, it's a really good time to review, and particularly the question and answer sessions. Sometimes you forget things that you learned or things that you heard. Even these Zoom sessions, someone asks you a question and then you remember that conversation with Ajahn Sumedho or that conversation with Ajahn Pasno, that conversation or experience with Ajahn Anan. You remember the things that you heard, something that the Dalai Lama said. And yeah, so the opportunity to teach in helping one recollect what one knows and re-remember it. Mindfulness is sometimes translated as right recollection. So recollecting what you know, what you've studied. Avidya is sometimes translated as forgetting. So that's the problem, because our minds are affected by ignorance, we forget what we've learned. And mindfulness with clear comprehension and wisdom is about constantly recollecting what we've learned and thinking wisely, training ourselves, weakening the greed, hatred, and delusion. So yeah, my life didn't end up quite what I thought it would be. The other monks in my monastery got the life that I thought I wanted. But we have to make the best of what life gives us. And I don't have any regrets. So not everybody can say that they don't have regrets. And I never really wanted to be an abbot. But like I said, I couldn't really find a monastery where I could live with a few friends and have as much time to meditate as I wanted. So I ended up having to build such a monastery. And although I'm a little bit busier than I thought I wanted to be, I have been able to teach, I think it's 8 or 9 retreats and lead 4 or 5 pilgrimages and build a monastery and create a forest and toughen up. The thing about having to patiently endure through difficult times is you become tougher. And I sometimes look at pictures of myself from 10 years ago and I look at him and say, oh, he was so sweet, that monk. He was such a sweet, nice guy, so sensitive, but he wasn't tough. And now I can be sweet and sensitive and tough. So there's something about having to follow through on projects until their completion that just gives you a stamina, determination, patient endurance, and a certain power comes with that. You can endure things when you have to, and then you become, it's possible to then apply those skills. So earlier in the year, as many of you know, I had to create a portfolio to support my permanent residency application, and then it's quite possible to produce 5 books in 5 months. That only comes from having trained in being able to do something for many hours a day, for many days in a row, until you get the results. And it also comes with knowing how to work with a team. That means proofreaders, editors, graphic designers, publishers, sponsors, and just keeping at it. I didn't enjoy the process, as I've mentioned before, but I do enjoy hearing that somebody found something in the book helpful, inspiring, nourishing, and I love giving out the books. So one of the reasons I'm doing I'm a Gemini with a Gemini rising. I don't know how many of you study astrology, but I think most of us, if we do the same thing all the time, a lot, we get a bit bored. And so I think with Geminis, especially a double Gemini, I'm a Gemini with Gemini rising, yeah, we get bored if we do the same thing all the time. So I'm completely fed up with computers. I'm completely fed up with books. I don't want to look at another book or make another book for a big chunk of time. There was going to be a 10th anniversary book, which JC was helping me with, but I've decided to make that a 12th anniversary book because 5 books in 5 months was enough. Thank you very much. And, but yeah, so now although I supervised a lot of the projects, I wasn't at the worksite actually doing the building. I was supervising and liaising. And I did train my gardener, who used to be an accountant, how to lay bricks in a particular way that I liked. And everybody has their weakness and everybody has their downside. His strength is that he does beautiful brickwork just the way I like it, because I like terracotta bricks, which look like ancient ruins in India or Sukhothai, or beautiful Newari architecture of Nepal. And he can do it in that way. And I love the combination of orange, warm, earth, grounded, with the green of the trees and the sky. It's all about balance, warm and cool, earth and sky. But his downside is he's so slow. He is really slow. And I can be a little bit impatient with good things. So now that we're making an abbot scooty, I decided that I was going to do the brickwork myself, some of it. I'm going to try to do about a half of it myself. And I'm enjoying it mostly. And he's there helping me, Nasieng, my worker, my main worker here. And but I probably do twice as much in a day as he does. And I'm just trying to show him it is possible to do nice brickwork and do it more quickly. And partly it's because it's December. The weather is the coolest month of in Thailand. And the area where I'm building the Abbot's Kuti is in the shade. So it's drier area, there's a breeze, there's a nice view, and the workers are nice. And also, since I'm currently the Abbot, I have a vested interest in making this space a place that I like and enjoy. And so it's a fairly large complex. The kuti itself is just 3 by 6 meters, but it has a large room in the middle, which will be a guest receiving room / in the future live stream teaching room, which will actually have fiber optic cable. So you will get a clearer picture and a clearer voice, I hope, from the new live stream room. And that room will have a lovely sandstone Buddha statue, terracotta bricks, a view of tree. People who join me in cyberspace hopefully will have that feeling of visiting Anandagiri. And then there's an office and a bathroom. And so my current kuti has become quite cluttered because now I have lighting, microphones, laptops, tablets, and a lot of statues, as you can see. So I don't mind having a lot of statues, but having a lot of statues and a lot of gadgets, it's a bit cluttered. So it's going to be really nice to be able to separate an office space where all the gadgets are and my meditation space, and to be able to put things away in a nice teak cupboard and then bring them out when they're being used and put them away when they're not being used. But yes, Anandagiri has been well supported and grew from humble origins and into quite a beautiful monastery. And now on an average day, we have about 7 guests. On the weekend, about 20 or 30. And there's a few days a year where we get 100 or 200 people. New Year's, the Thai New Year's, entering of the rainy season retreat. And now our Katina, we get about 400 or 500 guests. So yes, it's well supported, and it's still quite quiet and simple on most days. And I found a way to balance periods of retreat and periods of pilgrimage, periods of being engaged in projects, periods of helping. But I think being an abbot and being a teacher is not for everybody. I think you do have to have a particularly generous disposition, because you do have to give up a lot of your time and a lot of your preferences. So you just have to follow projects through. You have to make a lot of calls. You have to meet with a lot of people, and you just have to stick with it until it's done. And meanwhile, the other monks are going back to the kuti and they're on their meditation path, or they're peacefully sweeping leaves. But some people need creative challenges, and some people, it just means more. It means a lot to me that my life is also helping a significant number of other people. That just seems to be a part of my character. Other monks want to be alone most of the day, chant, dedicate merit, spread metta, benefit beings in that way. But for myself, for the teaching others, one feels grateful for the Dhamma, for the teachings, for the increase in well-being and peace and insight. And then naturally you want others to experience that. That's katanyu and katavedi. Katanyu is the gratitude, and katavedi is wanting to repay the debt of gratitude by sharing with others what has been shared with you. And yeah, so just last week, for the pouring of the concrete posts mentioned to the villagers, the opportunity to come, and yeah, the villagers come up and we all poured buckets of concrete into the post. And there's just a lovely sense of it being the villagers' monastery as well as our monastery, and they're wanting to be involved in merit-making projects, making some good karma for themselves. And it's very nice. I like my life. I like my monastery. I do hope that my permanent residency visa is approved so that I get to be the abbot that lives in that abbot's monastery, in that abbot's kuti. So your continued good wishes are appreciated. If it doesn't get approved, then that will be the next chapter in my life. And I'll be welcome somewhere. We'll see. At this stage, I have a good feeling. And recently I was invited to teach in English right here in Khao Koh. That was a surprise, because normally in Thailand the teaching gigs are in Thai. And so there was the Mahachula Longkorn Monastic University was having a 10-day retreat for their international monastic students in this area. And it was really fabulous timing, because I got this letter from the dean of the monastic university in Bangkok to please teach the international students. I think there are about 120 of them and 80 lay people. And I only had to sit in the car 20 minutes and teach in English, and it was all there. And for my PR application, it looks very good that Ajahn Achalo was invited to be the Vipassana master, they called me. I would never call myself that, but that's what they called me. So I was invited to be the Vipassana master to teach the international students. And so there were abbots from Bangladesh, Burma, Laos, and bhikkhunis from Vietnam. And when I walked in there, it was lovely, peaceful. They were really applying themselves in their retreat. And I could see that they're very sincere in their interest to understand. So I gave a talk, and I didn't realize it was being filmed on Facebook Live. 3,000 other people were watching while I gave the talk. And then in the 2 weeks that followed, it's I think there are now 40,000 plays of that talk. But that kind of teaching opportunity is as if it fell from heaven to look. One, I did want to help people, and I was very happy to find out that there's another way to help different people. Like one of the reasons it's got so many listens on Facebook is because each of those abbots or each of those monks, each of those nuns have their network of people. So you're seeing in the comment section, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu in Burmese, in Bangladeshi, in Laotian, and Vietnamese version of that. And so that was nice. And I'm going to be receiving a subsequent letter to teach there next year, because they're going to come next year as well. And it looks good. It looks like Ajahn Achalo is one of the teachers of the international Sangha of the Mahachula Longkorn Monastic University in Bangkok. And my letter of invitation, my letter of thank you is coming from the dean of the monastic university. So that was very helpful, and helped me to feel more optimistic about about my future here. Hopefully making good karma and helping people to have what they need. I will have what I need too. And if it's not here, I guess it will be somewhere else. So I've been going on for a while. Most of you are still there, but I might shut up now. I hope I answered your question to some degree. How does one balance, or how did I balance work and building and my practice with all these other things that abbots do? Thank you to all of you who have been involved as well in various ways. One can never do anything grand or worth doing without a lot of help from a lot of others. That's just the way it is. So there has been a lot of people helping from the beginning, and there continue to be a lot of people helping on every level. And I'm aware of that, and I'm grateful. So thank you for the opportunity to be a bhikkhu, to be a teacher, to be a building site manager, to be a reforestation project manager, to be a social worker, to be a writer, to be a chanter, and all the other things, and a meditator. So dedicate the merits of my bhikkhu life to all of you as well. And may we all continue to grow in Buddha Dhamma.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And thank you for sharing the interesting 10-year stories in brief, and all the teachings. And definitely we would like to dedicate a merit to your project, your PR application, and hopefully a good place for you to practice as long as you wish.
Thank you.
And maybe we can dedicate a merit to Sister Joy's birthday, which is coming soon, next Monday, 31st. And Chitta's birthday, I think Chitta's birthday is tomorrow, according to Sister Joy. So we'll keep them in the sharing of merit and dedication. May they be happy, well, and progress in the path.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Should we do our chanting? Shall we chant the dedication of merits, JC?
Yes, let me share the screen.
I have one last story I just remembered. Can I tell one more story?
Definitely, Ajahn.
So, when in the first year, towards the end of the first year, I had a dream. We're still in the middle of a building project. I had a dream that a truck came up the monastery road, which is called a song tao. Song tao in Thai means 2 rows. So it's like a pickup truck which has 2 rows in the back where people sit in 2 rows. And so I think 2 of those came up the hill, and people started unloading oranges in front of the tables in front of our small eating hall, dana hall. And so I didn't know what it meant, but I think I knew that oranges meant the Chinese people put them in front of the altars, and I think it has something to do with prosperity, abundance. So 2 days later, these song taos come up the road full of Chinese Malaysian people, out of the blue, totally unexpected. And so there was Brother Tio's group, and they were on a Phra Ajahn tour visiting great arahants of Thailand. And they were simply in this area. And I'm not one of the great arahants of Thailand, but I was a monk, a good monk who could speak English. And there was a Thai man, an acupuncturist called Mo Silapa. And he said, well, there's an Australian monk. And do you want to go and visit him? He's in this area. And I said, yeah, let's go and visit him. And so I remember I asked them, well, how many of you actually meditate? I think there was about 40 people. And I think about 4 or 5 people put up their hands. And I'm like, well, you're going around Thailand asking all these arahants for their advice. And I'm pretty sure they will all be saying to you that you should be meditating. And, but you're not meditating. So how about I teach you a guided meditation? I lead you in a short guided meditation. But I literally had to go downstairs under the eating hall where they were making the meditation hall and tell the workers, stop the drill, stop the sawing, stop the hammering, stop the clouds of dust, while I teach this group of 40 people basic breath meditation and metta meditation. And then after that group left, I received an invitation to teach a meditation retreat in Chempaka Buddhist Lodge in the Kuala Lumpur area. And so I accepted that invitation. But there have been many of these kind of experiences where I didn't know the person who offered this land to us. I knew someone else who knew that person. And so I came here, I was invited by someone I didn't know. You see the ripening of past merits. When it's time, things ripen. Now lots of stories are coming. Feel free to leave if you like, but I'm going to tell a few more stories. Because if you need to do something else, it's okay. But I remember before I went to India, in my 13th, after my 13th Pansa, I went to ask for blessings from a monk called Lumpur Kliang in Sisaket, who was about 100 years old, reputed to be a great bodhisattva. And he said to me, in 5 months, your monastery will be ready. Now, what's very interesting about that is that I hadn't told him that I hadn't mentioned anything about monastery. All I'd said to him was that I'm going to India. Could I please have your blessing? And so when I came back from India and I was at Pujamgom, Wat Nanachat's branch monastery, then when this layman came and mentioned that there was this land in Khao Kho in Phetchabun province, it was exactly 5 months. And another thing that had started occurring around that time was, out of the blue, I had a couple of dreams of Ganesha. Now, I had never dreamt of Ganesh before. And in India, I think Ganesh is associated with auspicious ripenings and abundance. In Thailand, Ganesh is actually associated with architecture and building. And so I'd had a couple of dreams of Ganesh. He was holding a white lotus and he was kind of just waving. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. And so, yeah, at exactly 5 months, I was invited to this land and it felt like the right thing. I consulted with Ajahn Anan and he said, yeah, this might be the place for you, Achalo. So there was a sign or premonition that something was about to ripen, and it did ripen at that 5-month point. And similarly, the building company was a friend of the person who offered the land. I didn't know them, but at the time when we needed building materials, the building materials manifested. And then this Malaysian group came. So it's like people came to me. I didn't go looking for these things. I did make prayers, aspirational prayers, and asked for clarity and guidance with regards, because I kind of accept that I don't have the full picture of myself, my life, and the universe. And so I had been to the Emerald Buddha, I'd been to the Buddha's Kuti in Savatthi and Vulture's Peak, Bodh Gaya, many places I had made aspirational prayers. If I'm supposed to be an abbot, may that be in a place which will be sustainable for me, but where I can help as many beings as possible. And given that I like meditation a lot. And so, yes, I think the power of aspirational prayer and making it clear what you need and then asking for guidance, then certain things start to ripen. And so then that Malaysian group came, I taught a retreat, and that became an annual, that Malaysian group asked to offer the first katina and asked me to teach a retreat every year since. And then I felt that I wanted to share the practice of pilgrimage. And so that became regular pilgrimages. And yeah, all of these things fell into place. And now we're 10 years into it. Okay, bye-bye. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you,
Good night, Ajahn.
Thank you. Good night.